Right, Karuna, thanks a lot for that. Yesterday, it's that important decision where finally we'll get a sense which way the AGR verdict would be announced. A lot of back and forth has happened. This has been a pending decision for almost a year now. Markets and telecom companies are now seriously awaiting that which way Justice Mishra is going to announce. Now, what is at stake today? Very simple. The AGR charges and the penalty which telecom companies will have to pay for the usage of spectrum. B, a decision is likely to come out on how the AGR charges for the bankrupt stroke NCLT telecom companies would be charged. And if indeed there is going to be an extension in the total payment which has to be given to the government, will it be 10 years? Will it be 12 years? Will it be 15 years? Now, the reason why this is important is because the future of Vodafone Idea or Idea Vodafone, Bharti, and to some extent Reliance really hangs on this decision. This decision will also act as a benchmark for how future cases on the government revenue sharing format would be decided. Now, from a market standpoint, I think the primary stock where the immense curiosity is Vodafone, because that today's decision is going to decide whether Vodafone will remain in business or will Vodafone be reduced to a minority telecom player despite a formidable market share of the voice business. The stock price of Vodafone, which is very important, which is what a lot of our viewers would want to know, has gone up from 8.5 rupees to nearly 10 rupees, which means markets or traders or HNI investors are expecting that the decision today is going to be favoring Vodafone and the time would be extended. Now, Nayantara, only Justice Mishra knows the decision. Markets are speculating, but if I put two and two together, it's going to be a very interesting decision considering that there is a lot at stake for Reliance, for Bharti, and for Vodafone.
Absolutely right, Nikunj. Good morning. Good to have the viewers with us. Countdown to a crucial verdict. In fact, in live updates coming in from our colleague Abhimanyu Sharma at the Supreme Court, Justice Arun Mishra, who will be demitting office incidentally tomorrow, has appeared on the screen. Remember, it's all now video conferencing when it comes to the Supreme Court. The verdict is going to be pronounced by a three-member bench, Justice Arun Mishra, Justice Gavai, as well as Justice Krishna Murari. So, Nikunj, absolutely right that we can't speculate. If you go by the previous hearings, and this is what I wanted to ask you something. This bench has really asked a lot of tough questions on the defunct telecom companies, whether it is Reliance Communications, whether, for example, Aircel's Sham system are wanting to know that going forward, if it were to agree with the government of delaying the timeline of AGR payouts, extending it over 10 years, 12 years, 15, 20, whatever it might be, the telecom company should not claim to be bankrupt at the cost of the public. So, Nikunj, you know, the tough questions that have been asked in the form of observations that why shouldn't an Airtel pay the dues of an Aircel? Why shouldn't Jio, if it has been using Reliance Communications infrastructure, pay the dues that are owed by Reliance Communications? That can really inflate the entire AGR payout. And then, you know, in a sense, if that happens, banks will also be in focus.
You know, Nantara, nobody wants a disruption. Consumers don't want it, companies don't want it, government does not want it, and I'm sure Justice Mishra does not want it. What is the easiest way to avoid disruption right now is that you show empathy and you have to understand that if the timeline for AGR payment is not extended, at least a company like Vodafone Idea will struggle to survive. If Vodafone will struggle to survive, that means the Indian telecom market would be reduced to 2, which is not a great situation to be in. Telecom, in a sense, is an important sector where banks have a large exposure. And then this is at a time when the economy has already got hit because of 2018 slowdown, COVID crisis, drop in investment cycle. This is the last thing you want to see, that you want to really you really want to shake out the telecom sector and the banks. So I don't think Justice Mishra is going to be a bull in a china shop. But there is a law, and the law needs to be abided. The definition of the law is very simple, which is that the AGR dues have to be paid.
Nikunj?
What is interesting here and what really... All right, the news is out. Was to pay AGR dues in 10 years. This is something
Nikunj,
which
I apologize.
is not going to excite the market, but yes.
Nikunj, I apologize for interrupting, but this is breaking news coming in from the video conferencing and the verdict being read out. The telecom companies to pay the AGR dues in 10 years. So Nikunj, the government asked for 20 years. The Supreme Court is saying 10 years.
Well, yes, and 10 year is something which is not going to be a life-changing move, at least for Vodafone Idea, for Bharti. So this is something which is going to have an immediate impact, and I expect the Vodafone stock price to come down. I will not be surprised that it comes down, and this could have a negative impact on the banks also. Look, in the short term, markets are about sentiment and psychology and positioning. And like I just said, that markets were pricing in that the relaxation for Vodafone Idea would go beyond 10 years. But Justice Mishra has said, look, 10 years is a good enough time, and they need to give the money back, or they need to pay the AGR dues in 10 years. So the stock market reaction, at least for Vodafone Idea, is not going to be all that constructive. So 9.5 rupees already down for Vodafone Idea. Let's switch it around to Reliance. Let's switch it around to Bharti, just to get a sense. And Nantara, you track the case much more than I do. Your understanding is very deep in terms of what the AGR thing is. 10 years is something which some would say it's a relief, but it's not something which would be an easy path ahead for Vodafone. Vodafone Idea and Bharti in this case will have to struggle, especially Vodafone and Antara will have to struggle to muscle up all the resources.
Absolutely right. For Vodafone Idea, and keep that stock in focus. It's bad news. It needed at least 12 to 15 years. The minute you add the principal payment, the interest, and all of that, we're still awaiting details on how much that will be, whether there will be an extra interest. But Nikunj, more news coming in. So the 10-year payment timeline. 10% will have to be paid by 31st October, 10% of the total AGR dues by 31st of October. And the managing directors as well as the chairman of the telecom companies will have to give an affidavit promising to make good on that payment by 31st of October. Existing bank guarantees will have to be kept alive. Okay, here it is. Payment of annual installment to become payable. Otherwise, you're going to see contempt proceedings against the managing directors and chairman of all of these companies. And every year, by 7th of February, the payment will have to be made. So the Supreme Court has even provided a timeline. So 10% of the total due has to be paid by 31st of October. And after that, for 10 years, by 7th of February, an annual payment will have to be made. But Nikunj, when you just talk about Vodafone Idea, and that's the one we really need to watch out for, what it's going to mean. Today was being seen as death knell, as D-Day for Vodafone Idea. So some cushion coming in. We need to just quickly check with our research department what the 10-year timeline is also going to be made, the relief that is coming in, how big or small it is.
In a 10-year timeline, Vodafone Idea will struggle with the existing resources to pay up, as simple as that, which means either a very fat price hike has to come in or they will have to raise substantial amount of cash. I don't think they will be able to raise substantial amount of cash via the debt route or via the equity route. Equity route, they've already done a right issue, so the scope of raising cash from there becomes limited. On the debt route also, until unless they are ring-fenced by the Birla Group, which is unlikely, or Vodafone decides to plow in more capital, they will struggle to raise debt. So the only way out is price hike. So it's going to be in struggle. Now, from a stock market standpoint, look, markets speculate, and markets were speculating that it would be a decision which would be more than 10 years. And that explained why last Friday and Monday the stock was warm from 8.5 rupees to about 9.5, 10 and 10.5 rupees. Now it's come cracking down. Okay, I'll tell you what, I've got Sanjay Kapoor. I'm going to get first reaction from Sanjay Kapoor. Sanjay, 10 years, everybody, especially in this case, Vodafone Idea will have to really raise a serious amount of capital via the debt route or the equity route, or they'll have to consider a price hike to pay the AGR dues. What is your sense?
Yeah, so Nikunj, definitely the verdict is onerous and, at the least, and a 15-year time period or a 20-year time period would have been more palatable. But obviously, even a 10-year doesn't bring a death knell today. It gives an opportunity for an operator to look at the next 10 years and work out what he wants to do. And it's also probably good for the government because rather than writing off all the dues today, there is a fair chance that there's a 10-year period. Now let's come down to the dynamics of the business. Obviously, the business that Vodafone Idea are running requires a lot of cash infusion, both to remain contemporary and competitive in the marketplace on current technologies, and then to start planning about the future transformation into 5G and other technologies. Now, both require tons of cash to sustain yourself. But it also gives you an opportunity to reposition yourself. Because I think with the dynamics that prevail in the market today, Vodafone Idea doesn't seem to be now contending for the number one position. And if you don't contend for the number one or number two position, but want to be amongst the top three players in the market, then there could be a more truncated strategy that you follow where lesser costs, you take up your prices, and then you choose your geographies where you want to deploy your cash and abstain yourself from areas that you don't want to compete in. So that those flexibilities now come to turn. Though the caveat here is that when you look at the global scenario, the third player, no matter even in high ARPU countries, really struggles for survival and doesn't make too much money. But any situation for Vodafone Idea right now is better than the situation yesterday, which is they could have shut down shop today. At least that is not happening. I think rates going up in the Indian market is inevitable, whether it's Idea or whether it's Vodafone or even Jio for that matter. I think given an opportunity, everybody would like to take their ARPUs up, take the prices up, because to be serving, 30 GB of data or at an average consumption, 16, 17 GB of data and realizing, less than 200 rupees for that is absolutely harakiri. It doesn't make sustenance for any type of telecom business globally. So I think it's just a respite from closing down today, but they'll really have to work out their strategy. And, like you said, either get funded by debt or equity. To me, equity seems more, a bigger possibility than debt, because there might be some people, it's a risk-return ratio at the end of the day. There might be somebody who could be looking at an upside from here because the current valuation of the company.
Absolutely right. So, to raise more debt will certainly be a challenge. Now, when we had last done the calculation of how much Vodafone Idea would have to pay, so if you saw an increase in timeline, we at ET Now did it as per the government's request before the Supreme Court, which was a 20-year window. The Supreme Court bench has not agreed with that. Instead, it wants a 10-year window. If it was going to be 20 years for Vodafone Idea, we had calculated an payout of 5,200 crore rupees a year. That is obviously going to change. Our research department right on top of that, how much it's going to come out to be on a yearly basis. Let me go across to the legal eagle that we've got on the panel, HP Ranina. Good to have you on the show. Good morning. This is Nayantara Rai. Mr. Ranina, so you've seen a crucial verdict in a sense that has come in. The Supreme Court certainly not only upholding the adjusted gross revenue payout, but not giving in to the government's request of a 20-year payment window. It has agreed to only 10 years. I would like to caveat at this juncture, the verdict is still being pronounced. We don't know if any of the new owners of the defunct companies will have to take on those AGR dues. If I could get your initial reaction on what this is going to mean for revenue collection going forward.
Well, it certainly is going to ensure that the subscribers, the people at large will have to pay a larger amount, because that's the only way by which they will be able to finance this payment. And as you rightly said, the equity is the best way rather than the debt way of, financing this 10-year staggering of payments. So ultimately, everything is going to go up, and people have to pay the price for this. And as I see, this is a final judgment. I think any player will have to see, which he wants to survive, will have to find ways of meeting with these guidelines. There's no way by which they can get out of it now. So the fittest are going to survive, that's for sure. And those who are in the play, like Vodafone Idea and others, will have to find ways to raise funds from equity if they want to, keep themselves afloat. Otherwise, I think they will be on the way out. So ultimately, there's going to be a shake-up in this industry, and consumers, of course, will have to shell out more in the coming years.
Is this a shake-up or a shake-out, something which you really want? Because the consumers don't want it, government does not want it, the court does not want it, telecom companies don't want it, but the fact that you've given a 10-year timeline extension to Vodafone Idea telecom companies, they will struggle. I mean, getting debt is not going to be easy, and getting equity is going to be tough, considering that all telecom companies already have done right issues. Prashant, would you like to respond to my question? I think Prashant is not there. So let me throw this question at Naveen is there, right? Naveen Kulkarni, would you like to respond to my question? Okay, Sanjay Kapoor's Naveen Kulkarni is not there. Just bear with me. Just those telecom connections are just getting slightly cross-wired. Sanjay, how inevitable is going to be a price hike now? If a price hike comes through, Vodafone Idea will survive, but Reliance and Bharti actually will hit a jackpot, and they will hit operating leverage and a profit leverage.
Yeah, Nikunj, I mean, the price hike was inevitable without this judgment. Now it makes it more imperative. They will definitely have to get more revenues from the same customers to survive. And this applies to Airtel as well. And why would Jio not want it? They are a debt-free company. If they can get more revenues, their values will multiply big times. They have the advantage of network with them because they have invested behind 4G. They can further enhance their capability. And the entire fight between the operators who are left will be on the experience of the customer rather than on price, because I think price will bring in respite to all of them and enhance everybody's survival for some and strategies for some. So I think price hike is absolutely inevitable in our market, given that 5G is staring at you. We are postponing 5G by a year, but we cannot postpone it indefinitely. If we want to get there, we have to know what it takes to do a 5G. We'll need a fiberized network. We'll need a great backhaul. We'll need 100 megs of spectrum. We'll need use cases and customers who can pay up for those use cases. So it's not a simple equation to solve. I think, let's see, but nevertheless, not the price alone. I think for now, Voda Idea will have to get some equity infusion from somewhere to bridge their capability building on the network and be competitive in the market.
Okay, let me invite Behram Vakil from AZB Partners. Good morning, Mr. Vakil. This is Nayantara Rai. So news also now coming in. The existing bank guarantees for spectrum will be kept alive till payment is made. Behram Vakil, 10-year payment timeline. You were looking at a D-Day for Vodafone Idea. What is your reaction to the very fact the bank guarantees will be kept alive?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Nayantara. I think, as all the experts have said, it's I think, a good compromise. Of course, the telcos would have liked a longer period, but 10 years should keep things going. And from a country perspective, to have 3 active players is a very good thing. Competition is always a good thing. And also, as many have already said, 5G is crucial for us as a country because all our strengths in terms of AI, ML, automation, all that survives on this infrastructure. And there is no better time than now to, really fortify that competitive edge. So no question it will hike costs. But in some ways, I think it's inevitable. And in a compromise, both sides, the ideal settlement, we always say, is where both sides are unhappy. Otherwise, there hasn't been a good settlement. So I think that's very likely here. The guarantees, once again, if you have a 10-year time period, 10% down payment, and then 10-year time period to pay, it's not surprising, frankly, that they have said that they need security for that payment. Maybe they'll go back to try and figure out what is the most cost-effective mechanism for security. And on the IBC question, they've sent it back to NCLT, which again is not surprising. I mean, they have enough on their plate, so I guess they've just passed the buck back to the NCLT to decide. So overall, I think it's a fair result in the circumstances.
Mr. Vakil, I have a
I think Nikunj had a question. Let's go to him.
No, Mr. Reninia, my real question is that can we, just for the benefit of our viewers, is this the final verdict or this could be challenged?
No, I don't think this can be challenged anymore. I think it has gone on for too long. And not only is it a final verdict, but they have also stipulated that non-compliance with this verdict would again result in contempt of court, apart from interest and penalties. So this is not a ground where you can go on a review petition. In any case, the judge is going to retire tomorrow, and the review petition can only be heard by the same bench which has given the verdict. Therefore, I think this is the final verdict. There's no point in pinning on any hopes that this may be revived or reviewed.
Vakil, do you think while coming out with a 10-year AGR window for the telecom companies, there were considerations which were given to the fragile state of the telecom sector and the fact that the telecom sector needs investment, and there's a 5G spectrum which is coming, which will require more capital commitment. I mean, for Vodafone Idea to survive here, they will have to maintain the quality of service, invest in 5G and pay the AGR due. That seems impossible, isn't it? Mr. Vakil?
Sorry, question to me?
Okay. Sanjay, the same question to you.
No, I agree that, yes, it would be a big stress on the telcos to pay off in 10-year period, at the same time provide quality service to the consumers, and at the same time be competitive for the 5G and the expenditure relating thereto. The only way forward, as I see, since this is the final appeal court judgment and the reviewed judgment, etc., if at all there is any change in the law, if you want more telecom companies to be in the market and to encourage competition, the only change which will be the only way to do it would be by change of law. And there's nothing new in that. For example, if you go back 20 years, when the power sector opened up, it was very difficult for all the power sector companies to survive then. And after all the pitfalls which were there, what did they do in 2000, 2001, around that time? They did change the electricity laws completely, and there was a reform in the electricity laws. So in my view, fine, we'll have to live with this judgment. There is no way out of it. Absolutely, there is no way out of it. So the telecom companies have got a respite, which is a respite of 10 years. They will have to pull up their socks, yes. But at the same time, in order for the government, for the competition to be there and for the consumer to get better service at a very competent price, the only way out is to change the law and have a mechanism where there is competition, where even the telecom companies can make profit and the consumers are benefited. Did I answer your question?
I just want to bring... Yes, Sanjay, please carry on. Then I'll just go to Nantara after this. Why don't you finish your thoughts?
No, I've completed my thoughts. My thoughts are, yes, I agree. A, I agree with what Bairam mentioned a little while back. Two, yes, it is a fair judgment or a fair reviewed judgment saying that both everybody is unhappy or all the parties involved are unhappy, which is the best settlement. At the same time, the telecom companies will have to pull up their socks. They will have to be very, very competitive. They will have to pay off in the next 10 years, be ready for the 5G.
In case you're wondering, now what's happened to the telecom space? Now what's happened to the telecom space? Idea Vodafone has collapsed. Collapsed is the word because for a stock which was up 10%, down 14%, that means there's an intraday swing of 25% for Idea Vodafone or Vodafone Idea. Now the stock had run up Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday morning. 8.5 rupee stock had become 10.5 rupee stock because it's a stock which has a very large equity base. It's there in FNO, and typically HNI investors and the Khabariya traders, they tend to buy the stock and they are in for a scramble, and they are selling it out. Bharti Nantara, in case you're wondering why Bharti is up 5% after the verdict and Vodafone is down 15%, is very simple. Markets are saying, hey, we'll vote for the survivor, and the survivor now in the telecom space are going to be two, which is Bharti and Reliance, or Reliance and Bharti, and Idea Vodafone will become a minority 3, which means market share gain, large part of data gain, large part of services gain, large part of customer gain. Every gain now will disproportionately be in favor of Jio or Bharti, and that is what I think markets are celebrating. So in case you're wondering, Nantara, in case our viewers are wondering that why, because of the decision applies equally to all telecom companies, but in this case Bharti has moved to the highest point of the day, which is up 5 and up 6%, and Vodafone Idea has collapsed almost through the ground or through the floor and is down by about 16-17%, because markets are saying we will vote for the survivor, not the fringe player or the minority player, Nantara.
So Nikunj, just to take forward that, could the corollary of what you're saying also mean, and what the markets are showing is they're not sure that Vodafone will survive, that it's not completely out of the woods?
Well, markets are saying that Vodafone will have to raise capital, whether it's debt or equity, or they'll have to consider a price hike. Now, all those three things will have to happen in tandem with each other, and they will have to also invest in 5G or keep their services up, because Vodafone in a sense has struggled with a poor infrastructure because they are a voice-based data company at a time when world is moving towards India, or India has moved towards data. Now, I don't know about the survival part. The Birlas have already said that, look, we are not interested in plowing more money. Vodafone Idea, or globally Vodafone is not excited about their India exposure. I'm not saying that they will not survive, but their importance in the overall scheme of things will contract. And what will happen is that the customer who ultimately has a choice to go for better quality services and with a better brand and with a better infrastructure availability and with better services both in digital and other applications will migrate. So whatever data, whatever 2G market share they have or the market share they have in other spectrums, I think will start gradually moving towards others, and that is what markets are celebrating today. What happens eventually versus what markets are doing today, Nantara, there's a big difference. I am simply saying what markets today are voting for.
The market's voting at this point for that. Nikunj, one more question I have for you. This case was very important also for the banking stocks, the banking sector, and the exposure. Middle ground found. Good news for banks?
Now, middle ground found, and I don't think there is case for a bankruptcy now. So the fears which everyone had, it's going to be a bankruptcy kind of a situation for telecom companies and Vodafone Idea, and the banking dues are going to be completely written off because they are not NPAs in their books. I think that fear has got averted. I've not looked at banks, but I'll not be surprised if, after today's knee-jerk reactions, if banks actually stabilize. Because today, Vodafone Ideas will have an impact on the RBL stock and the IndusInd stock, but that's trading reaction. I think Vodafone Idea will struggle, they will have to muscle it up, but they will survive, and when you will survive, banks will get their due. But our guests are there, so let's go across back to them, Nantara.
Okay, the guests are there with us. Let me go across to Naveen Kulkarni. He's with us. Naveen, my first question, everyone's talking about Vodafone. Look what's happened. Any rough estimate of how much it's going to have to pay every year and therefore the kind of capital raise it'll have to undertake?
Yeah, I think those numbers, Supreme Court had already on the July 28th verdict, the dues for each player were already known. So I think a 10-year EMI kind of a structure would be worked out. So probably around 5,500, 6,000 crores is what Vodafone Idea will have to pay each year. So that thing I think is quite well known. Question only was what has happened today in the market. I feel is that there's a lot of position which was built up with Vodafone Idea, and there's some bit of negative position which was built up with Bharti, because if Bharti has to pay for dues pertaining to Airtel or others, I think that would have been negative. Whereas Vodafone Idea, it was expected that they would get a period, extension of period. And I think we're seeing sell-off on the news happening today for Vodafone Idea. So I think that's the play today in the market mostly. We'll have to see how from here on what's critical is going to be how Vodafone Idea will raise the requisite funds, which in any case it had to do. But I think the verdict was a very, very critical aspect for business continuity. And now I think since there is a clear-cut verdict on what's going to happen, the fundraising plans and all those things will be set in motion by Vodafone Idea.
Numbers you're saying are well known, 50,000 odd crores, that was the balance. But Naveen, what we don't know is whether interest is also going to be charged. I'm going to come back to you once again for the market perspective, but let me quickly go across more for the legal perspective to Tushar Cooper. You know him well, senior legal counsel. Good afternoon, Tushar. My question to you is something that Nikunj was also asking. Can this verdict be challenged at all and middle ground found? Everybody gets to survive, in your opinion?
As to the survival aspect first, whether Vodafone will survive or not, apparently the market seems to be feeling otherwise. Well, according to me, yes, it probably will survive. It will sustain very negative times. It will have to put in far more capital in order to build its networks. Price hike will be inevitable for Vodafone, but unfortunately that will also impact its competitiveness if Jio keeps its tariffs where they are. So there's going to be tough going for Vodafone in short. Whether this verdict can be challenged or not, I heard one of the panelists say that this is the end of the road because a review petition would not be maintainable because Justice Mishra is retiring. That's not strictly correct. A review petition could be filed. I don't believe that review petition would meet with much success. But it is not as if a review petition is barred absolutely. They could file a review petition against this verdict, and it would be heard by a third judge who would not be Justice Mishra in view of his retirement. I fully agree with Behram that it is a fairly balanced and a reasonable verdict, given the finding on the AGR earlier, which held that these were the dues and these dues had to be paid. The question was one of time. 10 years, I think, is therefore a reasonable bridge between the 15 years sought for by Vodafone and the 7 years which was sought for by some of the others. I think, therefore, that on the whole, it is a balanced judgment. The question really which would remain and which would be an open question would be on the...
I'm going to interrupt you there, Tushar Cooper. Tushar Cooper, I'm going to interrupt you there. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been joined by Senior Counsel Kapil Sibal. Remember, he was representing Bharti Airtel. He is now with us on the phone. I'm sure our guests will also want to hear more from Mr. Sibal. Mr. Sibal, good afternoon. This is Nayantara Rai. When it comes to Bharti Airtel and your client, the markets are, of course, giving a massive thumbs up. Can't say that for Vodafone Idea. If I could first get your initial reaction to this crucial verdict.
I think as far as the government was concerned, they were willing to give us 20 years. Some Vodafone asked for 15. But I think now there is finality and clarity. They've given us 10 years and 10% upfront payment. I'm not sure about the interest part of it because I haven't read the judgment yet. But luckily, as far as Bharti and Jio are concerned, the issues that were raised by the court in respect of spectrum and whether spectrum can be security with the banks and whether it's property or not, that of course impacted Jio the most. That matter has now been to be decided, will be now decided at the level of the NCLAT. So that's over. As far as Bharti is concerned, there were issues in respect of both Videocon as well as Aircel. Luckily, the court has not passed any orders, so I think we've succeeded there. And there are no demands raised by the government. And there were no demands raised by the government at any stage. But the court, of course, was looking at it and heard us fully. So we're happy about that. And I think by and large, I think now each telco will have to decide on its own what is to be done. But of course, the judgment is final and there can be no appeal. Review petitions on their own are seldom successful because unless there is some error on the face of the record, reviews are never granted.
So yes, Mr. Sibbal, in fact, we were discussing that if there's even a scope to file a review petition, you did use the word finality here. Would that mean your client, Bharti Airtel, is happy with the verdict and doesn't see a need to go back to the Supreme Court seeking a review, especially since it may not have to pay extra now for Aircel and Vodafone Videocon's behalf?
Well, I don't know whether he's happy or not. We don't sort of discuss issues like this with the client. The client has to decide on its own in the context of its own financial position and in terms of its own projections, whether they would like to file a review or not. But that's something for the client to decide. As and when they seek our opinion, we will give it. But at this point in time, without the client first wanting to go forward, there's nothing that I have to say.
Mr. Sibbal, what is this verdict also going to mean as far going forward as a justice gross revenue calculation goes? Anything momentous from that front? Because that has, of course, been the big problem and the big charge of the telecom companies, the way it is calculated, taking everything in account.
But that matter has already become final. I mean, that issue has already been decided by the court earlier. So, we were only talking about how much timeline is available and what the court should do in terms of when to discharge those liabilities. The court has not, has reaffirmed that verdict stands. So that's not an issue. I don't think there's going to be a relook at that, unless, of course, at some stage, some petitions are filed and the court looks at that again. But I doubt that very much. Be that as it may, I think the more serious issue which we need to look at, and which courts also need to look at, is that a slump in the economy leads to defaults, and when courts are looking at economic issues like the health of a sector, they have to be exceptionally careful in rendering their judgments, because it can have disastrous consequences on not just the economy but the sector itself, or not just the sector but the economy itself. And we've seen that in the 2G verdict, because of the sensationalism, and of course the media had an enormous role to play there. Because of that, what happened was that, the court rendered a judgment. And prior to that, the sector was, in fact, a sunshine sector. But its decline started from then. We lost so many players, so much competition that was available at that point in time is not there anymore. Vodafone and Idea are in great difficulty. And the kind of dues that they have to pay, already I think Vodafone has incurred billions of pounds of losses. So I think at some stage, the courts have to be a little more careful before they render judgments. And that's exactly what we try to impress upon this bench when the bench said that spectrum is property and it belongs to the public, or therefore it can't be prima facie, they thought it can't be held as security with the telecom sector or with the banks. Now, if that's so, there would be no lending by the banks to the telecom sector if spectrum is not security, because that's the only valuable asset that a bank would have in order to lend money to the sector. Luckily, the court has not decided on that issue because if it had, it would have had enormous economic consequences. And that issue then will be decided now at the level of the NCLAT.
Absolutely right. And, in light of that, Mr. Sibal, when you're talking about how the court needs to be more cognizant, even show empathy for economic participants, large economic participants, with no clarity there and payments having to be made every year, isn't that going to have to be a big challenge, particularly when you look at Vodafone Idea? That stock is now down almost 20% in trade.
Yeah. This is always a problem because what happens is that, especially in the context of COVID and pre-COVID, after the economy was on the decline. If economy is on the decline, the cost of capital is very high and the returns are low. Naturally, the telecom sector or any sector would go under. So I think that there needs to be a constructive policy framework within which sectors should be dealt with separately, because not all sectors are impacted. For example, the construction sector is hugely impacted. The negative, it has slumped by 50.3% in the quarter April-June. The other sectors like telecom have also been very badly affected. So I think the government must come up with constructive policies to ensure that, the growth in the economy is sustained. That unfortunately is not being done. Okay, I have to go. Thank you.
Mr. Sibal, before I let you go, one final question. You did say the court never said anything about the defunct companies like Aircel and Videocon. Mr. Sibal, will that go to now the NCLAT to take a rule? Okay, fair enough. Okay, appreciate you joining us here. So there you go, Senior Counsel Kapil Sibal, representing Bharti Airtel. That stock is up over 6% in trade. Vodafone Idea, on the other hand, massive thumbs down from the market. At least from the market's perspective, its survival is under question. But the big breaking news, of course, you've got the AGR verdict in. 20 years is what the government sought for the payment timeline. 10 years is what the court has agreed to. With that, it's a wrap on this special coverage. Hope you enjoyed it.